Morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Bunty. Greetings from San Francisco.
Hey Rohit, how are things today? Everything's fine in London. Greetings from here.
Oh, very wonderful. We had like a supremely hot day yesterday, which was pretty nice, rare, because in San Francisco the weather works the other way around. I was up nice and early this morning, and since when one gets up early, brushing teeth is, pretty much the first thing, civilized human beings do. I was reminded of this ad about Dabur Dantmanjan. Do you remember it from our glory days of black and white Doordarshan?
Yes, I remember it faintly. But why don't you play it and let's refresh our memories?
Okay, fantastic. Let's do that then.
बच्चों, ये है हमारे दांतों की बनावट। दांतों और मसूड़ों को ठीक से साफ न करने से इसका असर पूरे शरीर पर होता है। इन्हें स्वस्थ और मजबूत रखने के लिए हमें सुबह शाम दांतों की सफाई करनी चाहिए। राजू, तुम्हारे दांत तो मोतियों जैसे चमक रहे हैं।
क्यों ना हो मास्टर जी, मैं डाबर का लाल दंतमंजन जो इस्तेमाल करता हूँ।
लेकिन मास्टर जी, आपके दांत
डाबर का लाल दंतमंजन, ये बहुत ही अच्छा है मास्टर जी। सभी इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं।
मास्टर जी आप
तुमने कहा था ना, अब मैं भी डाबर का लाल दंतमंजन इस्तेमाल करूंगा।
दांतों की करे हिफाजत मोती सा चमकाए,
डाबर लाल दंतमंजन से मुखड़ा खिल जाए।
किफायती और असरदार डाबर की एक आयुर्वेदिक तेल, डाबर लाल दंतमंजन।
Alright, so that was the ad, brought back a lot of memories. Essentially what happens in the ad is it starts with kids in a school playing during recess, as we used to play, short recess, long break, short break as it used to be called. And there's a young boy called Raju, who I think is shown as being very adept at the game. And then following that, the game, they're back in class. They're dressed in uniforms, khaki shorts, white shirt, yellow walls. It suggests it's a sort of humble school. It might be a government-run school.
Correct.
And a teacher called Master Ji, who's dressed in a kurta, vest, and a pajama, he is pointing to a diagram of teeth, a set of teeth, and he says that it's absolutely essential to keep your teeth and your gums in tip-top shape, because if your gums and teeth are not in good condition, it can affect the entire body. And then there's another boy who is bigger than Raju, he's darker than Raju, and he fits, I would say, the profile of the quote-unquote backbencher.
Right.
Raju also seems to be maybe around 9 or 10, but this other young boy is already developing a bit of a mustache.
Right.
He points to, something about the teacher, and then he says, "But Master Ji, aapke dant." And the whole class, including good boy Raju, bursts out into laughter, and then Master Ji is seen buying Dabur Lal Dantmanjan at a local kirana store. The shopkeeper tells Master Ji that this is excellent, and he runs into Raju's family, and Raju's mom, for some reason Raju's mom is very thrilled by the fact that Master Ji is buying Lal Dantmanjan. And then, the ad signs off. So that's essentially the long and short of it.
Well, look, this is a very interesting ad because again, it takes us back. For our young listeners who can't recollect it, it was one of the ads that you could happily snigger at in the 80s because you had evolved to toothpaste. And what Dabur was trying to do was do the Patanjali of its time, not knowing that it was doing something, very similar. So the interesting thing, a couple of social observations to make, Rohit, on the back of this ad. First is class size and age of students in class, which you talked about. Now, the system was that if you didn't clear your exams annually, you'd be held back in that class. Now, I don't know about you, in the school that I went to, and I will not mention it, there were a few people who had not got through on a couple of occasions. So they were lagging the system by a couple of years. So if you were an 11-year-old, you were with a 13 or a 14-year-old. Now that, at that age, is a huge difference in age, right?
Right.
which led to quite a lot of complications because, some of the things that these guys would know and be privy to would be very different to, what a standard 11, 12-year-old would be privy to. And I don't, because this is a family show, I will not get into details about how much and what was said, but your observation about a better built, bigger chap at the back of the class bullying the younger one was actually standard practice. And whereas bullying in other contexts is imagined as something that was happening because people were of, general propensity to bully, by and large, in my classroom, the people who would be kind of cast as the bullies were the bad guys who regularly fail exams and hassle kids who were seen as too geeky. Right?
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And so I thought that was one thing. The other thing was diagrams that teachers would draw on boards to illustrate things that they were teaching, right? Mm-hmm. To this guy's credit, he's drawn a set of teeth, right?
And very well.
And very well. I remember my school days, I had to kind of imagine the digestive system or, different type of molecular structures, whatever we were studying. The drawings were at best 3-year-old scribbles, right? Because there were people who just weren't equipped to draw on a blackboard, right? They could draw. So that writing on a blackboard and writing it well and illustrating well. So those are the two kind of observations that I had to give. The Dantmanjan ad itself is a weird one because when you look at it today, you suddenly realize that we went through a phase where we were consuming, we were led to believe that consuming certain types of personal care products were something to aim for. So you had to have a particular type of soap, a toothpaste, etc. So this kind of, for me, is a segue into what I think Patanjali has been doing successfully, which is scaring the multinationals with their kind of authenticity message that, in our heritage, which they have kind of taken a one-way conclusion on. It says that you have to rub powder or use neem, and there are definite Ayurvedic properties to it. I've been suckered by some of this communication. I myself have used some herbal medication and use the word herbal in a very specific sense of the term here, with limited result. It basically hasn't done anything for me. But what do you think of these kind of rise of the herbal?
Well, yeah, so, it's fascinating you mentioned this because in India, in the India of the 70s and 80s, as you said, the herbal was infradig and the nicely packaged, multinational Procter and Gamble, Hindustan Lever product, Colgate, Close-Up, whatever.
Correct.
Close-Up was considered especially exotic because it was red in color as opposed to white. Yes. And it had some kind of, cinnamon or something that made your mouth tingle when you brushed with it. So those were objects of desire. Those were objects of middle class aspiration and desire. Now what's very interesting now is that, in San Francisco, in hipster, enclaves in San Francisco, what is very trendy are exactly the kind of products that our grandparents used, which we look down upon in the middle class sort of setting in the 70s and 80s. So, shaving cream was highly desired. And then, I remember my dad shaving with those blades. What was the blade called? Topaz, right?
Yeah.
Shaving razors. So the Topaz style shaving razor has now become the sought after razor as opposed to the Gillette, which has, 6 or 7 blades now. So we've come full circle. Instead of shaving cream now, people are reverting back to shaving soaps. And there's something very interesting going on here, that in America, in hyper-capitalist America, in Silicon Valley's San Francisco, time, the ability to take time out to shave has become a status symbol. So a person, it was considered hip and trendy and cutting edge if you had an electric shaver. The idea of the guy like rushing off to take a business class flight to, cut some deal in Japan. Now the status symbol is someone who can take the time to use a shaving soap, right? Yeah. Really work up a lather and then shave at leisure. That has become the hallmark of, aspirationality, sorry. So it's really interesting how, class is, and objects are like contextual, and how in a sense India is a kind of inverted mirror image of what goes on in the West. And I'll just make a couple of other points on a different topic that, there is a kind of stigma also to the notion of, people repeating classes or failures, in the Indian society. And I think that speaks very poorly of the Indian education system, that
Correct.
this class
Correct.
system that it made. And many of the kids who were, the quote unquote good students who sort of mocked the failures, quote unquote again, these are people who've gone on to, do sort of successful things. They have successful bourgeois lives. Today, if you talk to many of the people who espouse those very discriminatory sentiments, and they were taught to espouse those discriminatory sentiments by their families and by society. But today you talk to them and they'll talk a very good game on, an egalitarian politics. And I think that talks to some of the hypocrisies about Indian middle class life. Okay. That said, it is true, of course, that, when you have this kind of a vast age difference, you get a different, it can sort of create a weird kind of apprenticeship and so on and so forth.
Correct. The other thing to point out, Rohit, I know we've played this ad, but we haven't kind of dissected this ad too much. All we are trying to do on this segment is obviously look at the ad and use that as a springboard to observe certain things that are going on, whether it's failure in school, the use of product. Was Dabur Dantmanjan a hipster before its time? I guess that's the question that we are posing. Because, and the other interesting thing, if you look at the ad in our kind of trip of looking at ads in hidden corners, if you look at the store that this Masterji buys his Dantmanjan from, it's basically a hole in the wall, right? Which when I was working in India, the perception was that hole in the wall position would change very quickly and it will be very glamorized retail very quickly. But my sense is that a large number of retail transactions that happen in the country for a consumer is actually not in the shiny shopping centers and complexes, but is in those kind of retail Kinara stores. And they vary across this. So for me, it was on the ad, what was really good was looking at the realism that was put out there in the 70s and the 80s. And yes, it's true, we sniggered at it, but it was realistic. I'm not sure what the realism, how would you hold that realism up in today's India? Because everything is so aspirational and kind of urban led. So yeah, that's the other point that I thought was very interesting in this ad.
Right. And I must confess to, developing a kind of fondness for those stores with the full understanding that this is NRI nostalgia. And there's no reason why Indians should not have the convenience of massive department stores and so on, like are there in the West. So once in a while when I go shopping to the Indian store near my workplace or at home, San Francisco actually has none, I actually enjoy walking down the aisles and, seeing those products, including Dabur products, Vico Vajradanti toothpaste, Tata Tetley tea or whatever. I don't buy many of them, but it does take me back to my childhood. And I think the Kirana stores have not entirely vanished from the horizon of commerce. Reliance is Big Bazaar. I think that's owned by Reliance. They try to do the Kirana store thing on a larger scale.
Right.
But I don't think they've entirely succeeded. They're commercially viable. But my sense is that even in big cities and small towns and in other places, that it will be a while before the Kirana store is entirely eradicated, and the mom and pop store, and whatever the flaws of the mom and pop store are, whatever the economic wisdom is, I think there is a kind of social function that they serve, and it would be a shame if we lost them in their entirety.
That's true. I think we've talked about this ad, Rohit, and as I said, that it's interesting at so many different levels. It's almost like a peek into a different time and a different place, which brings back memories, some relevant and some irrelevant, and we just wanted to hold it up for our listeners. So I guess that should wrap up this one.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll be back with another ad very soon. Bye.
Chalo, take care. Bye-bye.